In a world of flickering neon and cold steel, we are all searching for a moment of genuine connection. Join our community as we explore the beauty of human fragility through stunning 3D visuals and deeply moving narratives. Hit subscribe now and stay connected to the light.
I didn't pack everything. I left behind the photo on the refrigerator, the one where my sister and I were maybe 7 and 9, squinting into the sun at some lake I can't even remember the name of anymore. I left behind the ceramic mug I'd painted in 3rd grade, with my name spelled wrong on the bottom. I left behind 4 years of birthday cards that nobody had signed from both parents, just Mom, every single time, and even then, only when she remembered. I took my laptop, 2 suitcases, and the folder. The folder was what mattered. Inside it, every bank statement, going back 3 years, every bill I'd paid on my own, every student loan document, every email thread where I had asked for help and received silence or a subject change. I had started keeping that folder when I was 22, after a therapist I could barely afford told me that when people gaslight you about money, documentation is the only thing that holds. I didn't fully understand what she meant then. I do now. I drove out of Columbus on a Tuesday morning in November. It was the kind of cold that doesn't feel dramatic. No snow, no wind, just gray sky pressing down flat on everything. I had a full tank of gas, $412 in checking, and a second job offer I'd been sitting on for 2 weeks waiting for the right moment to accept. I accepted it from a rest stop parking lot somewhere on I-70. Then I kept driving. My name is not important. What happened to me is. I'll start at the beginning, because that's where the damage started. My sister Rachel was born 18 months before me. By the time I was old enough to understand the dynamics of our house, the ranking had already been established. Rachel was the one who got the bigger bedroom when we moved to the house on Fairfield Drive. Rachel was the one whose report cards went on the refrigerator. Rachel was the one my father introduced first at every family gathering, and this is Rachel. She's going to be something, I'm telling you, and then, half a beat later, like an afterthought he was contractually obligated to mention, and this is her sister. Her sister. Not even my name. Just her sister. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. Rachel was not a bad person. That's the part that used to confuse me the most. She didn't rub it in. She didn't lord it over me. She would sometimes find me crying in my room and sit next to me without saying anything, which, as a child, I didn't know how to interpret, and as an adult, I understand was probably the only comfort she knew how to offer, given the environment we were both surviving. The problem was never Rachel. The problem was what our parents built around her, and what they left out when they built around me. My father had a system for praise. I figured this out around age 11. The system was, Rachel received it freely, and I received it conditionally, and the condition was always moving. When I got a B+ on a history test, my father said Rachel had gotten an A. When I made the volleyball team, he said Rachel had been team captain. When I got accepted to Ohio State on a partial academic scholarship, he looked at the letter, looked at me, and said, "Your sister got into Northwestern. She had full ride, pre-law. She was brilliant, and she worked hard, and none of that was her fault." But here's what he said to me, that August, before I left for Columbus, standing in the kitchen while my mother quietly loaded the dishwasher and said nothing. "I hope college teaches you some discipline. Because so far I haven't seen much to brag about." I was 17 years old. I had a 3.7 gigapascals, a part-time job at a dry cleaner, and I had taught myself basic bookkeeping from YouTube videos because I wanted to understand where money went and how to make it stay. I had never asked my parents for a single thing they hadn't offered first. I had never been in trouble, never missed curfew, never given them a reason. I smiled at my father. I told him I'd work hard. Then I went to my room and I wrote down exactly what he said, word for word, in the notebook I kept under my mattress. The same notebook where I'd been writing down things for 2 years, ever since I realized that my memory and my parents' memory of events never seemed to match. That notebook became the folder. The folder became the thing I carried out the door. Ohio State was the first place I ever felt like a person with edges. I had a roommate named Deb who was from Akron, and laughed too loud, and made everything feel less serious. I studied accounting. I worked 2 jobs weekends at a cafe near campus, weekday evenings doing data entry for a property management company. I called home every Sunday for the first semester, then every other Sunday, then once a month, then when they called me, which by junior year was rarely. I graduated in May, 3 years ago now. My parents came. My mother wore a dress I'd never seen before and took photographs on her phone and said she was proud of me. My father shook my hand. He shook my hand like I was a contractor he'd just hired. Then he told me that Rachel had just been promoted to junior associate at her firm in Chicago. I nodded. I said that was great. I walked to the reception they held in the courtyard and I ate a piece of sheet cake and I thought, very clearly, with a calm that surprised me, I am done. I didn't make a speech. I didn't send an email. I didn't call a family meeting, or demand an apology, or give my parents the long list of grievances I had been quietly compiling for 22 years. I just stopped. I accepted the job offer I'd had since March at an accounting firm in Cincinnati. I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment 40 minutes from campus. I forwarded my mail. I updated my address everywhere that mattered. And I waited to see how long it would take them to notice I was gone. 7 months. That's how long before I received the first call. 7 months of silence so complete that I started to wonder if I had imagined being their daughter at all. When my mother finally called, on a Sunday afternoon in January, she did not ask how I was doing for the first 4 minutes of the conversation. I know because I was watching the clock on my microwave. She talked about a neighbor's remodel, a recipe she'd tried, something my father had said at church. Then, smoothly, the way you ease a car into a turn, she mentioned that things had been a little tight lately. I told her I was sorry to hear that. I asked if everyone was okay. She said yes, of course, just the economy, you know how it is. And by the way, had I gotten settled in Cincinnati, and was I saving anything? I told her I was doing fine. We hung up 11 minutes after she called. I opened a new spreadsheet that evening and titled it Family Contact Log. I recorded the date, the length of the call, the topics discussed, and one column I labeled Requests Made. For that first call, I wrote, Indirect, financial phishing, no explicit ask. I know how that sounds. I know some people would read that and think I was cold, clinical, treating my own mother like a subject in a case study. But here's what I've learned about families like mine. When you grow up being told that your feelings are an overreaction, and your memory is faulty, and your perception of events is wrong, documentation isn't coldness. It's survival. It's the only way to trust yourself. The calls continued. Every few weeks, sometimes every month. Always my mother, never my father. Always the same structure, small talk, pivot to finances, no direct ask. I kept logging them. The column for requests made slowly started filling in. Indirect became semi-direct. Semi-direct became, by April. We've had some unexpected expenses, and we were wondering if you were in a position to help at all. I said I would think about it. I did not send money. What I did instead was call my bank and set up a second savings account I labeled emergency only. I put $200 a month into it, automatically, starting that April. Not because I planned to give it to them, because I wanted to know that if I ever felt pressured into something, I had looked that pressure in the eye and chosen my own security first. I had not heard from Rachel in over a year by that point. She had my number. I had hers. We had exchanged maybe 6 texts since graduation, surface-level things, happy birthday, hope you're well, a meme once that she never responded to. I told myself it didn't hurt. Mostly I was telling the truth. Then in September, 14 months after I'd moved to Cincinnati, my mother called on a Wednesday at 7 in the evening. She did not start with small talk. She said, "Something has happened with your sister." I felt my stomach drop before she finished the sentence. Whatever distance I had built, whatever spreadsheet logic I had used to manage my feelings about my family, it did not protect me from that. Rachel was still my sister. For 18 months of my life, she had been the only other person in the house who understood what it meant to live there. My mother said Rachel had been in an accident. A car accident, 2 weeks ago, in Chicago. She's okay, don't panic, but she had been hurt, and there was a hospital bill, and between Rachel's deductible and some complications with her insurance, there was a gap that needed to be covered. I asked how much. My mother said $3,200. I asked if Rachel was home from the hospital. My mother said yes, she was recovering, staying with a friend while her apartment was being sublet. I asked why Rachel wasn't calling me herself. My mother paused and said Rachel was still tired, still recovering. It was hard for her to make calls right now. Something moved in me, not quite suspicion, more like a pebble dropping into still water. Small, but I noticed it. I told my mother I needed a few days to look at my finances. She said, of course. Take your time. And then she said, very gently, you know how much Rachel would do for you. And I wrote that down after I hung up, word for word. I did not send the money that night. What I did was open my laptop and look at Rachel's Instagram, which I followed but rarely checked. Her last post was 11 days ago. A photo of a coffee cup and a book, captioned Slow Mornings. She had posted it from her phone. I could tell by the format. She had commented back on 3 replies the following day. I stared at that post for a long time. Then I looked up the hospital my mother had mentioned. I called their patient inquiry line not for records, just to ask in general terms about visiting hours for the recovery ward. The person on the phone said they'd be happy to help with any specific patient inquiry if I had the patient's name and date of admission. I said I was just checking general visiting hours. They gave them to me. I called Rachel. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, she said. Her voice was normal, not tired, not weak. She sounded like she was eating something. I said hey back. I asked how she was. She said she was fine, kind of slammed at work. Did I see that Chicago got snow already? We talked for 4 minutes about nothing. Then I said, as carefully as I could, I heard you were in an accident. Silence. 3 seconds of it. Where did you hear that? She said. And that was the moment I understood. I told Rachel about the call. I told her about the $3,200. I told her what my mother had said about her being tired and unable to make calls. I read it from my log, because I had written it down. Rachel said, very quietly, I wasn't in an accident. She said it again, like she needed to hear it herself. What followed was the most painful 2 hours of my adult life, and also the most clarifying. Rachel had not been in an accident. She had not been in the hospital. She had, actually, just taken a long weekend trip to see a college friend in Nashville, which was why her Instagram had been quiet for a few days. She'd been off her phone. When she got back, she had a voicemail from our mother, saying she'd mentioned to your sister that you had a little situation and might need some help, and Rachel had thought it was something minor and hadn't thought to call me about it. She hadn't known it was $3,200. She hadn't known there was a fake hospital bill. She hadn't known any of it. We stayed on the phone until 9:30. By the end of it we had, between the two of us, mapped out a pattern going back 4 years. Money borrowed from our mother's sister and never repaid, attributed that a leak in the basement that Rachel remembered as a cracked gutter, not a flood. A loan Rachel had given our father 2 years ago for a business opportunity that he had described to Rachel as an investment and had apparently described to someone else as a medical situation. 3 other amounts, smaller, that I had refused or redirected, that had then apparently been framed to other relatives as money I was supposed to provide and didn't. My father had a gambling problem. I don't know when it started. Rachel said she had suspected for about a year, but hadn't wanted to believe it. Our mother, I think, had known for longer than either of us, and had been running interference in the only way she knew how, which was to redirect the pressure onto her daughters, rather than address it directly. I am not going to tell you I felt nothing when I understood this. I am not that good at performance. I sat on my kitchen floor, which is something I apparently do when things get too big for chairs, and I felt grief in a way I hadn't expected, not for what I'd lost, but for the version of my parents I had spent 25 years hoping existed somewhere underneath the people I actually knew. That version was never there. I can see that clearly now. Rachel called me 3 days later. She had talked to a family therapist she'd been seeing in Chicago, who had helped her map out what to do next. She also, and this is the part that matters, had called our mother. She did not call to argue. She called to say, "I know, we know, and we are not going to keep pretending." My mother cried. My father got on the phone at some point and tried to reframe it as a misunderstanding. Said he had meant to pay everything back. Said the economy had made things difficult. Said we didn't understand what it was like. Rachel, who is a much better lawyer than she gives herself credit for, said quietly, "Dad, we have documentation." We did. Between my folder and Rachel's memory, and 2 years of text messages, she had screenshotted, without fully understanding why. We had enough. We did not take them to court. I want to be honest about that. We talked about it. We consulted. And I am not exaggerating. An actual attorney friend of Rachel's who outlined what a civil fraud claim would look like, and what it would cost us in time and money, and emotional wreckage. In the end, we decided the cost was higher than the return. Not because our parents didn't deserve consequences, but because we deserved peace more than we deserved to be right. What we did instead was this. We sat down, together, on a video call with both our parents, and we laid out every transaction, every lie we could document, every story that had been told about each of us to the other. We did not raise our voices. We did not cry. We told them what we knew, what we could prove, and what was going to happen next. What was going to happen next was nothing from us. No more money. No more emergency calls routed through one sister to guilt the other. No more you know how much Rachel would do for you, or your sister is so worried about you weaponized to extract compliance. If they wanted a relationship with either of us, it would be direct, honest, and completely separate. They could not use Rachel to get to me, and they could not use me to get to Rachel. My father said we were punishing them for one mistake. Rachel said, gently but clearly, "This is not one mistake." I said nothing. I had already said everything I needed to say. Everything was in the folder. That was 8 months ago. Since then, things have been quiet. My parents have called twice, once at Thanksgiving, once in February. Both times, a brief check-in, no requests. I don't know if that represents genuine change or simply recalibration, and I have made my peace with not knowing. What I do know is that I answered both calls, said I was doing well, meant it, and hung up feeling something I had not felt after a phone call with my parents in maybe 20 years, nothing I needed to recover from. Rachel and I talk every week now. Real conversations, not surface ones. She told me recently that growing up, she had always felt guilty, not that she could name it then, guilty that she was given more. Guilty that she didn't know how to refuse it. Guilty that she didn't see what it was costing me. I told her the guilt was misplaced, that she had been a kid in the same house trying to survive the same weather. She said she knew that. She said she was still working on believing it. I said I knew what that was like. There's something nobody tells you about families like ours. They tell you about the damage, the therapy bills, the trust issues, the hypervigilance that stays in your body long after you've left the house. What they don't always tell you is that the damage has a sibling too, the clarity, the absolute bone-deep clarity you develop when you have spent your whole life having to prove things that should never have needed proving. I know how to read a contract. I know how to track a pattern. I know how to stay calm when someone is lying to my face, because I have had 25 years of practice staying calm when someone is lying to my face. I am not grateful for what my parents did. I want to be careful about that. Trauma is not a gift. The ability to survive something is not the same as being glad it happened. But I am clear, and for the first time in my life, I have a sister. My folder still exists. I update it when I need to. Most months now, I don't need to. The photo on the refrigerator, the one I left behind, I used to think about it and feel hollow. 2 kids at a lake, squinting into the sun. I don't know what we were happy about, or whether we were happy at all, or whether we were just 2 little girls who hadn't yet been sorted into their permanent positions. I think about it differently now. Those 2 kids both got out. That's not nothing. That's actually everything.